and slaps Diane across the face and insists she apologize like a whimpering dog. That's when one of the girls with a ponytail suggests they all head to a karaoke spot to blow off some steam. Another girl quickly agrees, saying that they definitely need to relax and have some fun. The ponytail girl crouches down to meet Diane at eye level. With a smug grin, she invites our girl to join them in their karaoke session, and she is sure that they are going to have a blast there. The second Diane hears that voice, she instantly recognizes that this is Zijin Kim, and she is definitely here to make our girl's life miserable. Before she knows it, they're all at a dingy karaoke place. The manager, catching sight of these shady-looking girls, can't help but feel uneasy. A while later, we see the manager again, who is pacing nervously toward the room where those girls had their karaoke session. He mutters to himself about how rowdy kids have gotten these days, and wonders what kind of mess those ladies might have left behind, because in their entire karaoke session, all he heard was loud screaming noises. The manager turns the lever and opens the door, only to find Diane sprawled on the floor, clearly beaten up. Thankfully, she's conscious, and starts to slowly get up. She fumbles with her things, her hands shaking as she gathers her stuff. The manager is utterly confused to see this unexpected sight and decides to call an ambulance, but Diane flatly refuses and stumbles out the door. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, the teacher is taking attendance and notices that Diane is still missing. When the students confirm she's not there, everyone is confused since Diane wouldn't just skip school without letting anyone know. In the background, Zijin Kim is smirking, clearly pleased with herself. Chicken Shake turns to her friend and asks if she thinks Diane will be okay. In response, Zijin simply tells her friend not to panic. She reminds her that Diane missing school has nothing to do with them. Chicken Shake nervously agrees, playing along and affirming that it's indeed true and has nothing to do with them. Finally, the school bell rings, signaling the end of the day. As usual, the boy waits outside for his sister, but he can't seem to spot her in the crowd of students. The crowd begins to thin out, and soon there's hardly anyone around, but his sister is still nowhere in sight. He waits for a bit, then pulls out his phone and tries calling her, wondering if she might have gone home already. Meanwhile, she's already back home, and her phone rings endlessly as her brother keeps calling, but she doesn't bother to answer and lets it ring. Eventually, the boy heads back home. His eyes immediately spot the sneakers she wears sitting over the doorstep. He pulls off his bag from over his shoulder and goes to her door, giving it a gentle knock and asking if she's inside. The girl quickly responds, and the brother feels a wave of relief knowing she's indeed there. Diane quickly asks if Jean waited outside the school today too. Jean knows Diaz and mentions that he even tried calling her, but she didn't answer. The girl apologizes heartily, saying she must have been asleep. Jean picks up on the odd tone in her voice and asks if he can come in for a second. Diane quickly comes up with an excuse, saying she's in bed because she's not feeling well. Worried, Jean asks if it's something serious. She reassures him that it's just a slight fever and that she'll be fine after some rest. Jean tells her to call him if she needs anything and decides to head out, planning to grab some medicine for her. But Jean suddenly stops at the door and notices that her sneakers are stained with blood. It doesn't take him long to realize something serious must have happened, since blood on her shoes isn't something you see every day. Once he pieces it together, he grabs the first aid kit and heads into her room to tend to her injuries. She winces as he applies bandages to her bruised face. It seems Jean still doesn't know the full story. Diane tells him she fell down the stairs while trying to dodge a bicycle. However, Jean points out that her injuries seem quite severe for a simple accident and asks if she doesn't want to see a doctor. She hesitates for a moment before insisting she's totally fine. I guess her hesitation to visit the doctor is understandable because if she goes to the hospital, they'll discover the bruises aren't from a fall down the stairs. The scene then cuts to Diane's past, where we find ourselves in the principal's office. Diane is telling the principal that she was beaten up by Zijin. However, Zijin flatly denies the accusations. The police are also involved in the case, and Diane insists that Zijin was the one who beat her up. She explains that Zijin was wearing a mask and hat, but she recognized her voice and is certain it was her. Besides, Zijin has a history of bullying her at school, but then Zijin, with a sly smirk, asks how Diane can accuse her when she didn't even see her face. The principal questions Diane if she saw the face of the person who assaulted her. Diane responds once again that the assailant's face was covered, but she's sure it was Zijin. At this point, Zijin's mother bursts with anger. She angrily accuses Diane of calling the police and treating her daughter like a criminal over a ridiculous accusation. The principal tries to calm the furious mother down, but she refuses to listen and makes it clear that she won't calm down. Meanwhile, Zijin's confidence crumbles as she realizes that no one seems to believe her, despite her certainty that Zijin was the culprit. Even the police officers are skeptical. The mother demands that Diane apologize to her daughter immediately for the accusation, but our girl stands her ground and tells the woman that it was indeed her daughter who assaulted her. The arrogant mother is infuriated by this and decides she will take the matter up with Diane's parents. She demands our girl to bring her parents to the school right away. This just breaks Diane's heart. She feels tears streaming down her face involuntarily, while the villain who assaulted her laughs and walks away unpunished. In the present, she feels trapped in the same situation she faced in the past. She believes that raising her voice without solid proof is futile and is determined not to offend her grandfather, who has always been a supportive figure for her. Suddenly, Jean notices her tense expression and puts his hand on her forehead, asking if she's really okay. The girl responds, albeit weakly, that she's fine. Jean points out that while her bones are broken, the bruises are pretty severe and will hurt for a few days. She nods and finds it surprising Thay's actually quite good at this patching up stuff, because she can tell the bandages are perfectly placed. She then becomes somber, remembering their grandfather. She's worried he might get upset about all this, especially since he has a weak heart. This news comes as a surprise to Jean, and the girl further reveals that their grandfather takes pills to regulate his heart health. In response, Jean promises her that he'll make sure their grandfather won't catch whiff of this predicament, and tells her to just get some sleep. As he begins to walk away, she calls out to him from behind. With a pleasant smile, she thanks him for all his help, and Jean reciprocates with the same warm smile. But once he's gone, her smile fades. She wonders if she did the right thing by not telling him everything. She feels that there's nothing a couple of teenagers like her and her brother can really do about the situation. However, we all know that Jean isn't an ordinary teenager, and I wouldn't be surprised if he already knows who was behind her injuries. Later, we find ourselves in a club where the high-energy music is blasting, and people are buzzing. In the middle of it all, we spot the boss bully, Jisoo Kim. He's gritting his teeth as he drinks and laughs with his boys. They're all discussing Jean and wondering how a single brat could manage to mess things up for everyone. One thug speaks up, reminding everyone that their downfall was due to underestimating Jean. He insists that they can take him out easily if they plan ahead. Another goon agrees, emphasizing that they can't just let him get away with this. A third adds that Jean won't stand a chance against all of them. Despite their enthusiasm, their boss knows that taking Jean down won't be a walk in the park. He's still seething from the humiliating defeat, but doesn't want to let it slide. He puts his glass down in frustration and reluctantly agrees with his lackeys. He makes it clear that going one-on-one isn't their style, so they might think of a strategic plan to take our boy down with numbers. The lackeys grin like Cheshire cats, clearly excited about their plan. This rowdy bunch may think they've got it all figured out, but they're nothing more than a pack of hyenas destined to get their comeuppance from Jean sooner or later. Just as they're planning their next move, Jisoo's phone rings. The caller ID shows it's from someone labeled, Little Bitch. It turns out to be his little sister, and it seems like even Jisoo agrees with us that she indeed is a bitch. Anyway, she starts yelling at him, asking why he's just sitting around at the club. Jisoo tells her to either say what she wants or he's hanging up. The girl insists that he owes her big time. Jisoo confusingly asks what she's talking about. She then reveals that he roughed up Dawn earlier today. She tells him they can't let the siblings get away with it, or they'll lose their authority in the whole school. Her brother, feeling a bit proud of his sister, tells her she did a good job. He reveals that they're also planning to get payback on Jean. Just then, someone walks into the club. As the bullies turn to see who it is, they realize it's Jean. He appears to be there to settle some business. Jisoo gets absolutely furious at the sight of Jean casually walking into his turf. But Jean just walks toward their table with a calm demeanor. Jisoo then feels somewhat relieved that they don't have to hunt Jean down anymore to get their revenge. However, Jean isn't there for a friendly chat either, and without wasting any time, he grabs one of the lackeys by the face and slams him down hard against the edge of the table. Another lackey charges at him, but Jin's hand moves so fast that his single punch shatters all the ribs of the attacker. The bully leader and his lackeys grit their teeth seeing their goons go down. The rest of the crew charges at Jean, but my guy just stays cool as a cucumber. As they get close, he kicks one of them down effortlessly, like a true Sigma male. Next, he grabs this purple head and slams him down on the table with a brutal thud. While this purple head is cowering for his life, Jean doesn't stop there and slams this dude against the wall like a rag doll. Then he balls up his fist and delivers a devastating blow to the fatty's face. One of the thugs grabs a glass bottle and swings it at Jean, but my guy casually knocks the bottle from his hand and follows up with a brutal whack to his face, which leaves the thug bleeding his mouth out. Another bully charges from behind, but Jean ducks down, grabs his hand, twists it painfully, and then delivers a hard slap across his face. Jean throws the thug aside and then grabs another lackey by the face. He smashes the guy's ugly mug right into his knee, breaking the thug's nose with a sickening crunch. With all the thugs down for the count, Jisoo is left speechless, unable to process what's happening. Meanwhile, his sister is still on the line, and she quickly asks what's going on because she has been hearing the loud commotion and chaos. Jin turns to Jisoo with a chill in his voice, making Jisoo shiver. He asks if he needs to repeat himself. Because as far as Jin remembers, he's already told Jisoo to stay away from his sister. Jisoo is absolutely boggled out of his mind to see how the tables have turned. It's kind of ironic that they tried to gang up on Jin, only to end up getting their own gangbanged. Jin fought like a pro and wiped the floor with everyone in just a few seconds. Meanwhile, Jin continues to question Jisoo, asking what his sister ever did to him. Jisoo plays dumb, pretending he knows nothing, while secretly reaching for a glass on the table. He throws the glass at Jin with lightning speed, but Jin just steps back casually, letting the glass shatter against the wall. As he stands there nonchalantly, Jisoo grabs a bottle and swings it at him. Our boy steps back once again, avoiding the hit, but when Jisoo swings the bottle once more, Jin knocks it out of his hand and counters with a punch, sending the contents of the bottle splattering everywhere. Jisoo tries to swing his fist this time, but my guy responds with another brutal smack to the bastard's face, leaving his nose bleeding like crazy. Jisoo stumbles backward, gasping for air after the hit, while Jin remains cool and composed, not even breaking a sweat. Jin then asks this bastard what twisted pleasure he gets from harassing a helpless girl. In a desperate move, Jisoo grabs a bottle, shatters it, and aims the sharp pieces at Jin's chest. But our boy shows no fear, and he quickly slaps Jisoo's hand hard, making the bottle drop. Then he grabs Jisoo by the throat and squeezes, causing him to struggle for breath. Jisoo's feet trip over themselves as he struggles helplessly, and Jin forcefully drives him to the ground. The bastard writhes and squirms, desperately trying to break free from Jin's iron grip, but my guy doesn't let up. His hand pressed firmly on Jisoo's throat, ensuring the once cocky bully knows exactly who's in control now. Jin then leans in and asks Jisoo what he should do with him. Jisoo, barely clinging to consciousness after the brutal beating, can't muster a response. Jin delivers his final warning, making it clear this is the last time he'll spare him. He warns him to stay away from his sister and to keep Jin, who is Jisoo's sister, in check as well. He emphasizes that if he hears a rumor about Jisoo or Jin bothering his sister again, he'll be back to finish what Hester did. To drive his point home, Jin tightens his grip on the bastard's throat even further, pushing him to the brink of unconsciousness. The bully is now desperate and on the edge, starts squirming and apologizing profusely. After that, Jin finally releases his grip, leaving Jisoo gasping for air and coughing violently as Jin walks away. As Jin walks out of the club, the staff inside exchange nervous glances, unsure of what just went down. Meanwhile, Jin and her friend, Chicken Shake, are strolling down the street. Jin has got a bad vibe and starts worrying that her brother might be in trouble. When they reach the club, they hear footsteps coming up the stairs. And it's Jin, casually making his exit. Jin is caught off guard and isn't sure what to do. She shouts for Jin to stop, thinking she can still play it cool because no one can pin the blame of what she did today on, but Jin doesn't even slow down. Jin, now really nervous, starts backing away, trips and falls hard on her butt. While she's rubbing her sore shoulder, Jin's phone rings. He checks it and sees it's his grandpa calling. After a quick chat, he simply turns around and just heads home quietly, leaving them curious about what he is even thinking. When Jin enters the clubroom, the scene is a mess. Her brother and his lackeys are all battered and bruised. She immediately starts shouting at him, demanding to know how he got whooped by Jin again. But her brother, too exhausted to argue, cuts her off and tells her to stay the hell away from Diane from now on. Jin, not grasping the seriousness of the situation, keeps pushing back, asking what the hell he's talking about. Her brother, visibly frustrated, finally loses it. He grits his teeth and yells at her to leave our boy's sister the F*** alone, but Jin doesn't back down and keeps shouting, questioning why he's so afraid of that bastard. That's the breaking point, and her brother snaps with his eyes blazing with anger. He makes it crystal clear that if she doesn't steer clear of Diane, he'll make sure to mess her up himself. Yikes, these siblings have a seriously twisted way of dealing with each other. It's wild how casually they talk about screwing each other over. Jin is shaken by her brother's outburst and she begins to tear up. We're back with our boy, who spots the grandfather once again. They sit down on a bench in the park. First off, Grandpa apologizes for pulling our boy away while he was having fun with his friends, but our boy says it's all good. The old man then gets a bit sad, mentioning that Diane got injured, and our boy was the one who treated his injuries. Our boy confirms it, and the old man explains that her injuries are pretty serious, but she refuses to go to the hospital. He shares how tough it's been raising Diane on his own. He never really knew how to raise a young girl and was always working hard to put food on the table, and he is just grateful she's come this far on her own. Grandpa reflects on all those years and says that looking back, Diane has given him so much more than he's ever been able to give her. He lost everything in that accident, and Diane was the only thing that kept him going after the plane crash took everything away from him. It breaks his heart to see her so hurt and not even tell him the real reason behind it. He wonders if she thinks he's too old to understand. He mentions a saying about how kids become distant from their parents as they grow older, so it must be even harder for her to reach out to an old grandpa. But our boy quickly reassures the old man that he's just overthinking. He points out that it's clear how much Grandpa loves Diane, and he's sure Diane loves him just as much. He tells Grandpa to stop worrying so much and promises that he'll look out for her at school. Hearing this, the old man is finally a bit relieved and genuinely happy that Diane has a brother-like figure in her life. The next scene shifts to Omnia Medical Examination Center. Inside, we see Jisoo with his injuries finally patched up. He's getting an earful from his father, who's clearly disappointed in him. His dad doesn't hold back, making it clear that Jisoo deserves every one of those injuries, because, as he puts it, if you're going to play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. The arrogant mother starts yelling at her husband, clearly outraged. She reminds him that their son is in the hospital, and this is all he has to say. She tells him to go find the brute who did this and yell at him instead. She also points out that the same brute busted Huijin's arm too. Honestly, it's a real mess. Huijin is a bitch to the point that she even pinned the blame of her own mishap on our boy. We all know that she tripped and banged up her shoulder, but instead of taking responsibility, she's blaming him for everything. The angry father finally calms down and lets out a deep sigh. The concerned mother tells her son to just focus on resting and recovering. As they start to leave, the mother grumbles about making the kid who hurt their son pay if she ever gets her hands on him. Once they're gone, Jisoo finally asks his sister why she had to tell their parents everything. He explains that by doing so, she's just made things worse for him. He feels humiliated that people will think he ran to their parents like a whining brat after getting beaten up. His sister then asks how she was supposed to hide the fact that her brother was in the hospital and that her arm was broken. Jisoo gets pretty ticked off and demands to know if Jin was the one who did this to her arm. She remembers how she tripped and fell, but she doesn't mention that to him. Instead, she just says that Jin was responsible. It's messed up how she's shifting the blame so shamelessly. She then quickly stands up and tells him to just stay here and get better. She says she'll make sure they realize once and for all who they're dealing with. Jisoo sits there, unsure if they should mess with our boy again. Meanwhile, we're back with their parents. The woman reveals that she's just spoken to Mr. Cha, but her husband asks why she's complicating things and tells her to let the school handle it. The woman responds that it is Saturday already, and she doesn't want to sit back and twiddle her thumbs waiting for them. She starts yelling, pointing out that the school won't deliver real justice for what was done to our kids, and they'll likely only settle for a suspension or expulsion at best. The husband continues to argue, saying she has no business going to Mr. Cha to handle this personally. The woman reveals that she already knows Mr. Cha and that he's been handling his dirty work for years. Meanwhile, Huijin is eavesdropping and feeling pretty smug about her mother contacting Mr. Cha. She knows that Mr. Cha is the scary gangster who works for her father, and she's sure this will put an end to those troublemakers once and for all. The scene shifts to a rundown place where Amon is fidgeting with his lighter, clearly on edge. Two goons walk by, looking pretty disappointed. They grumble about being ordered by their boss to handle some teenage drama, and none of them are thrilled about it. Even the boss himself isn't thrilled about dealing with this kid's squabble, but hey, a job's a job, even if it means wading through a mess of teenage nonsense. The scene flashes back to a time where a luxury Mercedes is zooming down the road. Inside the car, Mr. Cha, the mafia boss, takes a call from the woman. She fills him in on how her daughter's hand got fractured, and her son got beaten up by some teenager. She's insisting that he needs to handle it. Cutting back to the present, Mr. Cha is puffing out smoke from his cigarette, clearly fuming. He's beyond frustrated that he has to deal with this kind of nonsense as well. The scene transitions back to the quarters, where our boy is sitting before his computer, still lost in thought about his encounter with the Jisoo. He's wondering if these guys are really going to let it go. Suddenly the doorbell rings. He hears his grandpa arguing with someone at the door. It turns out that the people at their doorstep want to see Jin. The intimidating man outside claims they just want to talk to Jin for a bit. Grandpa, concerned about the late hour, questions what could be so urgent. Our boy steps out of his room, telling his grandpa that he'll be back soon after he hears what they want. Despite Grandpa's reluctance and even his sister's protests, Jin flashes a pleasant smile. He reassures them that he knows these guys and that it's just a quick chat, nothing to worry about. With that, our boy leaves his concerned grandpa behind. The goons take him to an abandoned construction site and he wonders who they might be taking him to meet. When they finally arrive, the lackeys report to their boss that they've brought the guy in question. The boss remains silent, puffing on his cigarette. The bald lackey reveals that the kid caught on quickly, didn't make a fuss, and just came along. The boss, a bit surprised and pleased, decides to make it quick. He snaps his fingers, and the lackeys immediately grab their iron bats. One lackey tells his friend to hold our boy's arm, as he'll be the one to dish out the beating. Meanwhile, the boss sighs and decides to text the mother, letting her know that he's taken care of the job. While the boss scrolls through his phone looking for that mother's number, the lackeys ask him why our boy had to mess with the kids of Kim family. As soon as our boy hears the mention of kids, he realizes this must be about Jisa Kim. The boss, feeling frustrated and annoyed, pauses his scrolling, deciding he shouldn't call her while our boy is present. However, he looks over at our boy and is intrigued by how unfazed and emotionless he appears. Just as the lackeys charge at him, Jin suddenly uses his ninja-like speed. He grabs the bald lackey's hand before he can swing at him and pushes the man toward him, delivering a brutal shoulder smash right to the lackey's face. The boss watches this with his wide-eyed eyes, as he witnesses this flawless execution of the move. Meanwhile, the other lackey, bat in hand, swings at our boy. He ducks, letting the bat swoosh harmlessly over his head. But the lackey tries another swing, but our boy charges at the bat as if it's no big deal, leaving the mafia boss utterly bewildered. With lightning speed, our boy locks the baseball bat in his arm and delivers a brutal punch right under the lackey's chin. Not stopping there, he follows up with a devastating blow to the lackey's chest. Then, with a fierce grip, he grabs the lackey by the neck and throws him down onto the bricks below. The boss watches in talk, clearly impressed and flabbergasted by the sheer skill and audacity of our boy's moves. The bald lackey grabs our boy from behind, threatening him with death. But our boy quickly jabs his shoulder into the lackey's ribs, and then delivers a solid shoulder smash to his face, sending him crashing to the ground. Mr. Cha realizes that this kid is no average teenager because his combat skills are exceptional. He finally decides to step in himself. As he strolls forward, he scratches his head, snickering and commenting that he never thought of be fighting teenagers at his age. Meanwhile, our boy can tell that even though this man is a mafia boss, he still is a weak sauce, because my guy can clearly spot all of the weak spots off this man. As the boss swings a powerful fist at him, Jin effortlessly sidesteps it. The boss then starts a barrage of punches, but our boy dodges each one with ease, making it look like a walk in the park. As they continue their back and forth, our boy quickly sidesteps, but another punch comes straight at him. He blocks the hit, though the heavy force makes him skid backward. The mafia boss sneers, impressed that he managed to block that one as well. Meanwhile, Jin checks his wrist where he took the punch and his hand winces from the aching pain. He realizes that the mafia boss predicted his movements and delivered the punch with precision. On the other hand, the mafia boss' curiosity has finally piqued, and he asks Jin who he really is. Jin casually replies that he's just a high school student. The boss isn't buying it. In his mind, he figures this kid must have some serious skill and experience to fight like this. Jin takes his stance. With a grin, the boss saves up for sparring further and balls up his fist to deliver a blow to our boy. Our boy quickly deflects an incoming punch and tries to throw one of his own, but the mafia boss sidesteps effortlessly. The boss then attempts to attack, but our boy grabs his hand and swings a punch towards his gut. The mafia boss reacts again, causing our boy to end up landing a hit right to his face instead. Mr. Cha is absolutely annoyed after taking that hit right over his face and tries to swing another punch at our boy. Once again, our boy deflects the attack and locking eyes with his opponent delivers a brutal blow to his face. He follows this up with a series of powerful punches, knocking Mr. Cha to the ground, leaving him feeling utterly humiliated by a teenager. It's surprising to see a mafia boss who relies more on his fists than on guns. Anyway, once Mr. Cha is defeated, he grins, noticing that our boy doesn't seem rattled at all by the fight. He doesn't know where this kid came from, but he's sure that the Kim family definitely messed with the wrong person. The scene transitions to this agency, known as National Assembly membered by Kim. Inside the building, 2 guards are stationed outside an office. Inside the office, we see Mrs. Kim and Mr. Kim. The women ask her husband why Mr. Cha hasn't responded yet. She is growing impatient with every passing second, tells him to call Mr. Cha. Mr. Kim responds that she should just wait, as Mr. Cha will call back once he is done dealing with our boy. On the other hand, we also see their daughter who lets out a sigh. And just then, the telephone begins to beep. The impatient lady quickly tells her husband to put the call on speaker so she can hear the news herself. Mr. Kim begins by apologizing to Mr. Cha, saying he's sorry for the ridiculous favor his wife asked him to fulfill. But the women, however, continue to argue loudly, insisting that their kids were attacked, so she doesn't understand how it can be called ridiculous. To everyone's surprise, Mr. Cha says that he's the one who should apologize. Mr. Kim asks for an explanation, and Mr. Cha reveals that it seems their children have meddled with the wrong person because Cha himself also had been defeated by our boy. This news rattles Mr. Kim to the core. As far as he knows, Mr. Cha is the best enforcer in the business, and it's unfathomable that hell is to a high school kid. Just then, the office door starts rattling as someone tries to force it open. Both Mr. and Mrs. Kim look anxiously at the door. When it finally creaks open, they see soldiers sprawled on the ground, leaving the husband and wife utterly anxious and alarmed. Even their bratty daughter jumps out of her seat when they see Jin strolling into the room. The door behind him slams shut, leaving their unconscious bodyguards on the other side. Mr. Cha, still on the phone, quickly realizes that Jin has made it into their place. He leans back, letting out a defeated sigh. He's still trying to wrap his head around the fact that he got beaten by a single high school kid. He's now anxious about how to deal with this mess. Inside the room, Jin jumps up from her seat as Mrs. Kim starts yelling at Jin, demanding to know if he's the kid who beat up her children. On the other side, the man at the desk demands to know how Jin managed to get into his office. That is when this stupid woman begins to grit her teeth in frustration because she is pissed that her husband is not overreacting like her. The husband remains calm and composed, and asks again, more insistently, how Jin got past the security. Jin just shrugs and casually replies that he simply passed the guards blocking the entrance. Mr. Kim is even more shocked and confused, not understanding how Jin managed to beat Mr. Cha and all the security guards. What bothers him even more is how Jin even found out that he's living here. That shithead woman starts yelling again, telling Jin to stop giving them attitude. She quickly begins dialing the emergency hotline to report Jin for assaulting her kids and breaking into the office. Meanwhile, Jin feels a sense of pride in her mother's actions. She believes that involving the police is a good move, thinking that even if Jin has impressive fighting skills, the law will take care of him. The arrogant mother tries to intimidate Jin with her threats, claiming she'll call the police or even the district attorney because she thinks Jin has no idea who he's dealing with. Jin, however, remains calm and responds that he has a pretty good idea. He points out that her husband is a second-term assembly member currently running for office. The woman scoffs, asking Jin if he knows so much about their status. Then why did he assault her kids? On the other hand, Jin smugly sneers, feeling satisfied that they've cornered Jin, and faintly tells him that it's game over. The authorities pick up the call, and the lady starts yelling into the phone, demanding that the officers reach Kim's office right away. But before she can say anything more, she falls silent when she hears something unexpected. Apparently, Jin plays the full footage of the karaoke